Все, теперь все должны согласиться с тем, что вы согласны, чтобы вас записывали. Добро пожаловать. Всем добрый вечер. Добро пожаловать. Good evening. Welcome. I always remind everyone that we have two working languages, both Russian and English. Можно говорить по-русски, можно говорить по-английски. Наши презентующие будут говорить по-английски, но вопросы вы можете задавать и по-русски, и по-английски. And we are starting, as became our tradition, a two-part event. So today we have a webinar, and I will introduce our presenters in a minute. And in a week, but on Friday, we're going to have a follow-up Teachers Lounge where we can discuss questions of using AIs in our classrooms in more depth, perhaps share our experiences, examples, our concerns, our solutions to those concerns. And I just put in the chat, and for those who are just joining, I'll put it in again. This is the link to sign up for the Teachers Lounge, which again is in the week, but on Friday, not on Thursday. And today we are having a webinar on the use of generative AIs in the Russian language classroom. And we have two presenters, and I will introduce them in the order in which they will present. So first we have Doina Grecu. Doina is a PhD candidate studying TESOL and world language education at the University of Georgia. Her research interests focus on teacher language ideologies and their influence on classroom practices, as well as the decolonization of the Russian as a foreign language classroom. She's currently teaching Russian at the intermediate level and has previously worked with students at the elementary, intermediate, and advanced levels as part of the Russian flagship program at UGA. And Doina is also a participant in the Middlebury Star Talk program. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to welcome you, Doina, to the ACTR audience to share your experiences.
Thank you so much.
And the second presenter is Kit Pribble, and Kit is an assistant professor of Russian at Wake Forest University. Her areas of research are second language acquisition with an emphasis on digital learning technologies, as well as the development of romantic prose forms in Russia in the 1830s and 40s. Kit has published and presented widely on topics within 19th century Russian literature, Romanticism, and L2 pedagogy, including projects on using Slavic folklore and digital social reading in the L2 classroom. And I must add that Kit also most recently presented on the use of generative AI tools in the language classroom at the most recent ADSIL conference in Las Vegas. And Kit teaches Russian at the elementary, intermediate, and advanced levels alongside courses on literature and culture. So again, welcome to everyone who is here with us today. Welcome to the presenters. And let's begin this ACTR webinar on the use of generative AIs in the classroom. One last thing I forgot to add, questions. So what we thought would be the best approach to this is to allow our presenters to go through their material, then pause to get a couple of clarifying questions from the audience. Then the second presenter goes, and again, a couple of clarifying questions before we can take maybe more general questions. And again, this is a webinar, and we will continue this discussion next week. That's it. I will pass the microphone, metaphorically, to Doina.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm Doina. I'm currently at the University of Georgia. And I just wanted to share some of the things I've been trying to do with the help of generative AI. By no means I am no expert. It was just out of curiosity that I wanted to see what else can I do and how can I use this in the classroom to enhance the students, my students' experience, and also just to maybe see what's out there and how this might help me in creating materials and just making my work easier, maybe. But also the main goal was to make it the learner's experience more fun. So I'm going to talk about two tools. That's ChatGPT, which you've heard about probably, and one tool which is used to create or generate images, which is the Bing Image Creator. I chose this one because I read that it's one of the best ones out there, which is free. So both ChatGPT and Bing Image Creator are free. So you can easily sign up and start creating with their help. So as I was saying, I use these tools to create materials. I did not include the students, or I did not open my classroom to students using the generative AI yet. It's just my experience with it creating materials. So you all know what ChatGPT is. It's a system whose main function is to develop language for artificial intelligence. And it is in constant training to maintain conversations. What is interesting about it, I started to think whether I can use it in my classroom. And when I started looking into that, I was very surprised to find out that ChatGPT learns to provide information according to the personality traits of each person. So the replies and the answers you would get should somehow be influenced by who you are and the kind of conversations you've had with ChatGPT so far. That's in theory. I haven't noticed this yet because I haven't compared with other people, but that's something interesting to remember. Hence, they say that it's not just, generative AI just generating stuff, but you do this together with the AI. Also, the ChatGPT provides information taken into account the specific needs of each user and their strengths and weaknesses. Anyways, the first question to ask probably is like, why use ChatGPT or any other generative AI? That's a question I ask myself as well, and the answers I have so far is the fact that it's really fast, and we are all teachers. We are very, very busy, I'm sure that, and we need help. That's there's probably no debate here. So the AI can be really, really fast and can give you information faster than just looking for it for Google and browsing the way we've been doing it so far. Again, another thing is that everything is in one place, is very convenient. So again, you don't have to browse through websites, open all of these websites and try to see what is out there. You can just ask the question you have to ChatGPT, and it's going to use all the information it has to provide you an answer to that. I think that it's great that I can use generative AI to adjust and improve the materials I need to work with, and also to make my classroom a bit more creative and personalized. And we've been talking for decades about student-centered education and learning, but this takes time. It's not easy to create materials for our specific students in the classroom and always go back to the new students we get. So I think that the AI tools can really help us with that, provide them with a more personalized experience in the classroom. Yeah, in case there's people out there who haven't created an account yet, it's pretty easy, just like any other website. So I just added this, and I'm gonna leave this for those who might want to try out afterwards to create an account. It's, as I was saying, it can be free, but there are some payable options as well. Anyway, so there are different types of teaching materials. I was trying to create with the help of ChatGPT, and divided them into several categories based on the types of skills we basically normally work on in the classroom. So we can definitely create writing activities for students with the help of ChatGPT. Just some examples can be generating prompts for creative writing, creating examples of text the students have to write, stories, emails, ads, blog posts, and so on. Creating writing activities based on images. And here we can use the Bing image creator, and generating open-ended writing exercises, as well as writing dialogues with missing lines. Anyway, so as you can see here, all of these types of tasks require a lot of time, because if you were to write all of these things on your own, that would take you a long time to do it. Also, you know, we are just one. We as teachers are just one in our classrooms, and we have one head. Как мы говорим по-русски, одна голова хорошо, а две лучше, да. So AI basically helps us reach out a lot of other heads as it pulls out all the information it has out there on the internet. Because being creative can be might not be easy all the time, especially when you don't have too much free time to get ready for a class. So for example, I asked ChatGPT to generate a list of creative writing prompts, and that's what I got. It immediately gave me a list of 10. Anyways, it was a very generic task I asked ChatGPT to do, just write creative writing prompts. And even out of those 10, I found something that I thought could work for me and my classroom and for my students based on what we do and based on the topics we need to cover. Yeah, because it's about pets. All the students like pets. It's a topic that you can always include in the classroom. It's I've never had any issues with students covering that. And also, you know, we always talk about families, and we teach our students to talk about their families. And this is a very interesting idea from ChatGPT to ask the students to write from the perspective or through the eyes of their pet about their family. It's a creative idea, just a bit different, and but still it keeps the topic to the level where we are at, because it might be difficult to include creative writing in the Russian classroom, because we don't always get to work with students at a very advanced level, and also we have some very specific topics we need to cover, so we may not have the time to include all of these creative writing prompts. So, but again, if you have, it's easier to do that when you have a specific topic in mind, and for example, you're working on a new unit about money, so then you can ask ChatGPT to create a list of creative writing prompts on the topic of money, and then that's going to be more focused and easier, and just what you need for your classroom. Yeah, as I was saying, there are more here. Some of them might be very far-fetched, not really plausible and doable in the Russian language classroom, as I was saying. But again, this was a matter of seconds. I got this in like 10 seconds, and then you can look for it and choose what you like, as opposed to you thinking and deciding. It takes a lot more time, and then it's you might be out of ideas, and you can find yourself out of ideas. Besides that, let me see. Speaking activities, of course, we can create lists of questions on particular topics. Again, this is a very easy task for ChatGPT to do. You have a topic, and you ask ChatGPT to create a list of questions, that's very, like every single time I would start the class with some questions, just general questions, to see how the things are going with students. But also, if you want to ask them some more specific questions related to our topic, then and then you're out of ideas again, ChatGPT can help. We can create AI generated responses to questions as examples. Okay, so we a lot of times we have questions for students, but then it can be more difficult for them to answer and have the specific structure in mind. So just giving examples of answers can help them to focus their attention on the structure, so they don't just start saying things without and forgetting things about forgetting their grammar at all. Also designing speaking activities based on AI generated images. Again, the AI image creator would be of great help here. I think something I wish we had more in the Russian classroom were images in the textbooks, which is understandable based on the fact that Russian is a less commonly taught language. So the book business is not as big as in the English as a foreign language classroom, for example. So so we can definitely use the image creators that are out there right now to use the materials we already have and add some pictures and just provide different types of information for our students. Also, I try to generate a list of interesting conditional questions for students. Again, we typically have like yesly or yesly be questions in our textbooks, but sometimes we might wish to make them more creative and generate some more exciting conversations. And it was really helpful to look into what ChatGPT could offer. And I asked it to generate a list of questions with Yesly and Yesly, and it again immediately gave me a very long list with some very interesting options. Like, если бы вы могли вернуться во времени, чтобы вы изменили в своей жизни, если бы вы могли изменить одно правило в мире, чтобы это было, и так далее. Again, I think what's best is that it gives you so many options that it's easy to pick from. Then just always start to think about what else can I come up with to spark these interesting conversations with the students, and not just go about with the same questions I've always asked. Also, I used to work with students individually. So one of the topics we would discuss with our third-year students was the topic of money, which is an interesting topic by itself. But again, I would see them twice a week, and then the unit lasted for like 2 weeks. So we had several sessions where we had to talk about money. So at one point, I decided I wanted to see what ChatGPT could tell me, or like could suggest me that I could ask the students. So again, this was really fast, and I got this list that then we discussed with students, some of them, of course, not all of the questions. We can create reading tasks as well easily. It's very easy to write a story based on a particular level, grammar point, gaps, and so on and so forth. However, I wanted to add that it's not that easy. I think that ChatGPT is doing this kind of things better with the English language than with the Russian language. So because I tried, I read all kinds of articles of other educators creating materials for their classrooms. But then when I asked ChatGPT to create a specific task for AI, for A2, for example, the level for the students, then it's not really A2. So it's not really good at creating this kind of differentiation in the language that it's using. But still, again, it's where you can start from. And that's how it's been most helpful for me. I would go to ChatGPT, I would ask it to create something, and then based on the materials I had, based on the things we were covering in the classroom and the vocabulary, the target vocabulary I wanted to see in there, I would edit the text. So my work was to edit, not just to create it from scratch. Creating similar text for differentiated instruction. Again, sounds great in theory. It's not that easy, but still, what is really great with ChatGPT is that you can negotiate, let's say. So you get the answer that ChatGPT, the first answer you get from, or the first text you get from ChatGPT, and then you give feedback. So it's not like with the image creator, which I've been using. It's not possible to do that there. You get an image and that's it. You cannot give feedback to the image creator and have something tweaked in the image itself. But when it comes to text, then it's possible. So then by giving feedback to ChatGPT, you slowly get to where you need to get. Also, we can create text specific for the teaching context with the information we have about our students, and we can use the information about our students in the prompt. So we can ask ChatGPT to create a story about 6 students, for example. I have 6 students right now. About one student is interested in skiing, another one is interested in ballet, and so on and so forth. So then when they would read that, they would see that it's basically about them. Also writing reading comprehension questions for an existent text, really useful actually, and it works. You already have the text in the classroom, in the textbook, for example, but you think that, or you want to use it in a different way than it's suggested in the textbook. So very easy to ask ChatGPT to create a list of questions. Creating post-reading exercises of different kinds and creating a text with reading exercises, it's also doable. Something I asked ChatGPT to do was to create a text on the topic of my dream house, because I wanted the students to have more examples than just the one they had in the textbook before, as additional materials that would help them and direct them in writing their own essays. But I asked ChatGPT to write a text for intermediate students or A2. I tried A2 as well, and it didn't work. The language is way too complicated, actually, way too complex. Also, another thing that I noticed, and something we need to pay attention to, is the fact that there are mistakes that ChatGPT makes quite often, actually. Sometimes there is an agreement between the noun and the adjective genders or cases and so on. When it comes to more complex sentences, it's even worse. For example, I tried to create grammar items with katori, and I asked ChatGPT to create more examples, and I gave it some examples I had, and I wanted something similar, and it was, the grammar was not on point, and I had to, but still, I could use the ideas from those sentences and just tweak them. But something we need to watch out for. Also, just as an experiment, I asked ChatGPT to write like a fairy tale for intermediate level students. there are some elements to fairy tales here. It's and here actually the language is a lot easier than you would have in a fairy tale if you weren't to interpret and adapt it. But as I was saying, for example, here you can see была мягкая и удобная мебель. So we definitely need to double check the text we get back. Also, vocabulary, there are different types of vocabulary tasks. I have tried to create. There are for sure more out there, and I would love to hear from your experience next time when we talk, or maybe at the end, because as I was saying, it's being creative together is a lot easier than just being creative alone. So generating sentences with a new word, it can be, again, very time consuming to come up with new sentences to elicit the meaning of a new word, or in order to show the new word in different contexts. So again, ChatGPT can be a great use here, creating vocabulary quizzes and all kinds of exercises. And I'll give you an example. The vocabulary quiz I never used. I just wanted to see how good ChatGPT would be in doing this. So I asked it to create a quiz with 10 items with multiple choice items on the topic of furniture. And the first one that came out can show you that ChatGPT is not perfect. It's not a human being. So it's definitely, like, we need to work with it to create something useful and interesting. Then you can see, что это за предмет мебели. Then we don't have a picture, we don't have anything. You just, okay, there's no way you can see which answer to choose. But others were pretty nice, and you could definitely use them. Что используется для хранения посуды, столовых приборов на кухне, да, или кухонный шкаф. Будет ответ. Again, just a very quick quiz you can give the students to make sure they're reviewing the vocabulary, because not always do our students learn the vocabulary, even though they have everything they need to. Also, something I created, as I was saying, you can create different kinds of vocabulary quizzes and generate similar texts, which I think is the best for me at the moment, because we give our students vocabulary quizzes for every single unit, and we had this text in the textbook, and I wanted a similar text for the quiz, but about the different city, because then this text had all the target vocabulary that we were working on. So I asked ChatGPT to write a similar text about Riga, because one of my students is gonna travel to Riga this summer. So I'm trying to include places that are mostly relevant for them right now. So I do not know much about Riga. I do not know much about Latvia. I've never been there. So this is not the text I got. It was a bit longer, but then I got something I could work with, and the target words were there. So, and then I double checked the information, like when Riga was founded and how many people live there, and it was correct information that I was given. So just to make sure that I really like when students do get some like meaningful information from the texts and the exercises. It's not just language, it's knowledge as well. So then I had to include this in our learning management system, but these were the words they had to write and translate, which for me personally was a lot easier than just sit down and write the text myself, and having to find out everything about Latvia, everything about Riga, CDF. I don't know much about. Okay, so something that probably Keith is going to talk about as well is prompt engineering. And every time we talk about AI, we need to think about prompt engineering. That's how you ask ChatGPT or Bing Image Creator to help you. Yeah, because it's a skill, as people say. So it takes time and practice to learn to generate prompts, but some of the advice I found is to be very specific. Obviously, you need to be able to tell the AI what you need. So the language needs to be specific, but also concise. Not the prompt shouldn't be too long. Examples are great. Again, I really love the feature of and the ability to talk back to the ChatGPT and give feedback, because they're using the examples to improve the results you're getting, and also you need to refine and iterate in the output from ChatGPT. Is not, if the output is not the one you were hoping to get, then you give feedback and you're going to eventually get to where you want it to be. Also, something I'm more excited about and something I'm experimenting with currently is the Bing Image Creator, because I'm really bad at drawing. As I was saying, I think unfortunately, do not have enough color in our textbooks, enough images, and adding visuals can really, really help students. I really believe that. So if you've never heard of it, you've never tried, you can try later to go to bing.com and create. And it's a very, very easy tool to use. Just again, write the prompt and wait for the result. So why use that and not just download images from Google, for example? That's because you can create and generate the things you cannot find, which is, again, sometimes you're looking for a good picture for your specific topic and context, but then you can't find it. So I was thinking about like my context. I studied EGA, where our mascot is the bulldog, so the white bulldog. So I tried to create that, and I used these images on my PowerPoints when talking about free time, and also we discussed, when you have like, what would a UGA student typically do, in their free time, and it's like, obviously, we don't hang out with bulldogs. There are no bulldogs on campus, but that's just something fun, a fun element to talk about and laugh about in the classroom. Also, I used this, and we talked about how students spend their money, what they spend their money on, and so on and so forth. Also, I once had to work with this text from an existing resource. It's a text about Sikh king. It's actually referred to, I found it online. It's the Pricha. Yeah, and which was adapted to, and here we were working on generative case. So the idea is that there was this Sikh king who got ill, and in order for him to get better, he needed to put on the shirt of a happy person. And then his soldiers started to roam about and look for a happy person and borrow their shirt, but they couldn't find both a person who was happy and had a shirt. They were eventually managed to find a happy person, but that person didn't own anything. So it was a poor person who was really happy but didn't own a shirt. Anyways, so I think this is a really good exercise, because we don't only practice the generative case, but there is a message there as well. So I added the images just to make sure that the students could connect, and also like additional, just to provide them with additional support to understand the meaning of the text, because it's important to me for them to understand what they're reading about, not just write the grammar without thinking about the meaning. But also this could grow into another task, a subsequent task, like next time you can meet and like, let's remember the text we worked with last time. So you have these two images, use them to retell the story that we worked with last time. There are different ways you can go about this. You can generate images for different for different moments in time from the story. So again, they could retell the story by looking at the images and recalling all of those plot twists. Also, I think this is a very good tool to create illustrations for proverbs, idioms, and expressions. And the prompt I put in was, for example, a wolf headed to the forest and an office table in the field. And then the style I wanted it in. And you can probably guess that the proverb I had in mind was, let's see if there are any guesses. Работа не волк, в лес не убежит. And then we discussed it with the students. It's a very good illustration. I really like that because it shows you literally the literal meaning of these proverbs and idioms, but then you discuss the meaning and then what their attitude is. And we had a very nice conversation of whether they sometimes give themselves permission to forget about work and just relax, because that's what their body requires. Anyways, as I was saying, the prompt, this is the only thing I wrote. And in just a matter of seconds, I got these 4 very beautiful pictures that I couldn't find anything remotely nice on Google, because I first checked Google. There's no point in using AI to create something that there already exists. Another example is like время деньги, and I tried to experiment with different styles. That's what I got. It can become part of a longer task or exercise where they need to match the expressions we've been working on, where we were encountering in the textbook, with the images, just to recall them and work on them, on their retention. Being image creator can also provide you with Soviet posters. So that's a style you can add at the end. The only thing is that it's still struggling. Do you see, these are supposed to be some messages there. That's nothing that remotely reminds us of Russian or any of the messages from Soviet posters, but I mean, maybe there are some other ideas, some other topics where this would fit better. Something I used in my class was for Valentine's Day, just to acknowledge this day somehow. I just told them, you see, there are some idioms or some expressions in Russian that people would say. Then we talked about любовь, морковь. They really like that. It's very easy to memorize. And again, it was a matter of seconds to create this. Something I'm currently working on, and something I want to create a worksheet with idioms that contain prefixed verbs of motion. So it's not gonna be just one idiom like related to the topic we're discussing. It's gonna be related to the grammar, the structure we're working on. So I created these images for like выйти, выходить из себя, and then I'm thinking that I'm gonna give them an example, the image they have, and also they will first need to choose between the different types, just to give them a chance to think about the prefixes and the meaning of the prefixes. And by looking at the picture, the person is stepping out of the room. So which would be a prefix that should work in this idiom. So we will discuss about what the meaning is. Then here, what do you think the idiom is? Вылетела из головы, and then it took me, with this one, it wasn't easy actually. So it's not that easy to create. I knew exactly what I wanted to see, but the image creator I was using was not helping me in the way I was hoping it would help. But still, I did manage to get something out of this. So вылетела. Same thing is for руки не дошли. Oh my God, it took me so long to get to this one because I was не дошли руки, just for them again. I think this is a good chance for them to see the literal meaning, and for them to understand the prefixes and to memorize the meaning of the prefixes. And actually, these is like idioms. They are not just for fun. These are things we really use a lot in language. So I thought that's a good chance for them to see that verbs of motion are used in more metaphorical ways as well. Yeah, illustrating the message of a song or a poem. So we have here just two songs that came to my mind. Земля в иллюминаторе, Миллион алых роз, which we were using actually. So just again, it can become part of a longer task where students had to match pictures with the titles of the songs. Maybe at the end of a semester, just to, you know, remind them of the things they've listened, remind them of these songs. Movie posters like Москва слезам не верит, and so on and so forth. As I was saying, it's not perfect either. So the AI image generators are struggling with text, as I was saying. And also look at this picture, it's terrible. The faces are really bad. It's like if there are more elements in the picture, then they're gonna be butchered. So we can't always rely on this. So sometimes our ideas are not doable with the help of free tools. I've never tried tools you need to pay for. So this is what Bing itself tells us about how to create better prompts. So they are saying that you need to be very specific and have a descriptive prompt. So it's like not just write as like you would Google like astronaut. You need to have an idea of an image. So, but again, I had situations when I was too specific. Like I knew exactly what I wanted, but Bing wasn't helping me. Yeah, I wasn't getting what I was expecting. And some of the styles I wanted to add because when I just started working with this tool, you know, I discovered that there are different types of styles that you can try. So watercolor, abstract art, a realistic photo, and so on and so forth. And I think I'm going to stop here. I'm sorry, kids. Too much of your time.
Thank you, Doina. So I think maybe in the interest of time, maybe you can hold off on questions until Kit presents her piece. You can also type in your questions in the chats if you want to like preserve them so that you don't lose them, and then we can take them on at the end. Thank you. So next presenter is Kit Pribble.
All right. Thank you so much, Doina. That was really interesting. And just going off of what you said about images, I can share that all of the images on my presentation today were created using DALL-E, which is the ChatGPT, I think, paid image generator. But that's where all of these images came from, and I had a lot of fun making them. So as Doina has just shown in her wonderful presentation, there are a lot of potential applications of generative AI in the Russian language classroom. In my presentation, I'm going to focus on just one of these applications, which is the use of generative AI chatbots for at-home conversation practice in Russian for students. And I hope to demonstrate first that AI chatbots offer Russian language learners significantly expanded opportunities for developing interpersonal communicative competence outside of the classroom. And second, that this particular use of AI has the potential to fill an existing gap in traditional classroom instruction. Specifically, it offers a potential solution to the frequent lack of opportunities for students to have extended one-on-one conversation practice in Russian at home, especially if they may not have access to a Russian-speaking community or Russian-speaking family members. So since my focus today is on interpersonal communication, I want to just start with a very quick refresher of how interpersonal communication is defined in the most recent edition of the World Readiness Standards, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. So when we're talking about interpersonal as opposed to interpretive or presentational communication, we're talking about unrehearsed and spontaneous spoken, written, or signed interaction in which learners are put in a position where they have to negotiate meaning with their interlocutor in real time in order to share information or feelings or opinions. And importantly, all of the benchmarks for the interpersonal mode at the novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior levels emphasize that the skill here is really spontaneous conversation. So learners should be able to spontaneously, without rehearsal or memorization, ask and answer questions. And then at the higher, advanced, superior level, also support arguments, express opinions, explore hypotheses. And in my experience, finding opportunities for students to practice this particular skill, so spontaneous interpersonal communication, can be tricky, especially outside of the classroom, where there may not be another speaker of the target language present. And particularly if you teach in a context where you have fewer contact hours during the week, it can be really hard to find sufficient opportunities for one-on-one conversation practice. So while I think it's relatively easy to assign homework activities that target the interpretive and presentational modes, it can be really tricky with the interpersonal mode. And I think what's particularly difficult to replicate in out-of-class assignments is precisely this spontaneity and the need to negotiate meaning in real time. So this real-world kind of anxiety-inducing experience of navigating an exchange where you might be encountering unknown words and phrases and being kind of put on the spot where you have to answer a question. And it can be, again, I think quite difficult to replicate that experience in assignments that are assigned out of class. So over the past few decades, a lot of tools and strategies have been proposed to try to fill this gap, particularly in the field of computer-assisted language learning. So these strategies will include various platforms that offer voice and text chat with other students, learners, or with native speakers, including, of course, interaction on social media, Zoom or Skype-based conversation clubs or Russian corners, interaction on online computer games, and then also platforms that connect learners to native speakers, again, usually through Zoom or through Skype. And studies have shown that these computer-assisted language learning strategies, which tend to be student-centered and largely self-directed, in addition to developing interpersonal communicative competence, also support the growth of learner autonomy. So they promote students' ability to use effective language learning strategies on their own without external direction, and promote continued independent engagement with the language outside of class, which is really good for our students after they've left their class or after they've left university or the institution. However, there are noticeable barriers for using a lot of these platforms. Most importantly, a lot of them are expensive and they can be difficult to integrate into existing curricula. And then there's also privacy concerns when we're thinking about asking students to create social media accounts or interact with live individuals. So I think that generative AI is really positioned to significantly widen access to opportunities for students at home, self-directed development of interpersonal communicative competence in a way that really goes beyond what these earlier call methods were able to achieve. So in order to discover whether this hypothesis bore out, I implemented a series of activities in 2 of my fall 2023 classes. So one was a second semester intermediate class, and the other was an advanced conversation class for both advanced heritage speakers and also 3rd and 4th year Russian language students. And in both cases, the goal of the activities was to target specifically interpersonal communication skills. So in the intermediate class, I had my students use AI chatbots, usually, but not always ChatGPT, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, but usually ChatGPT, to use these chatbots to practice 7 different task-based role plays at home before then having them repeat these role plays in class the next day with a partner. And many of these role plays then ended up serving as the basis for the speaking section on our unit tests for the first 3 chapters of ACTR, which was the textbook that we were using. And I've laid out here how the 7 different role plays map onto those first 3 chapters of ACTR. So for example, one of the role plays for chapter 2 on внешность and одежда involved consulting a stylist to figure out what type of outfit to wear to a given location or event. So that was the intermediate class. And then in the advanced class, I, instead of role plays, had my students use AI chatbots to practice debates on a series of abstract topics. So играет ли реклама скорее положительную или отрицательную роль в современном обществе? Возможно ли действительно понять другую культуру? Нужны ли брак и семья для счастья и личного благополучия? And in this case, the activities, of course, targeted the more advanced and superior level interpersonal communicative skills of constructing an argument and supporting an opinion. So I'm now going to share some of the specific activities that I had my students do, as well as examples of the work that they turned in, so transcripts of their conversations with the AIs, and then also the feedback that I received from students on anonymous post-activity questionnaires. But I want to start with the disclaimer that one of the goals that my students and I set for ourselves last semester was to figure out together through these experiments how best to get the AI chatbots to do what we wanted them to do. And Doina mentioned prompt engineering, right? So trying to figure out the best way to phrase these requests so that the chatbot produces the desired output, right? So at this point, having done these activities, having seen how they went, gotten feedback from students, and just learned more about prompt engineering myself, I would say that with a lot of these prompts, I would phrase them differently now than I did last semester. So as I'm sharing some of these activities, I will also offer kind of a revised version of the different prompts with some tips for how to, again, tweak your instructions so that the AI does the thing you want it to do. And I was going to talk about prompt engineering, but Doina kind of gave a very helpful explanation of that already. The idea just being that there's kind of a language barrier between us as humans and the AI chatbots as computers. We don't really speak the same language. They speak ones and zeros. And so the idea of prompt engineering is figuring out how to translate your request in a way that will produce the desired output. So for example, this is the assignment that I gave to my intermediate Russian class for our second role play activity, which we did in conjunction with chapter 2 of with chapter 1 of ACTR, which focuses on talking about yourself and your family. And this role play, I'll also add that of the 7 we did, 5 of them used typed chatting, so not voice to text, not voice chat. And the reason for that is that there's still a lot of technical issues with the free versions of most of the voice chat features on the different generative AIs. And I think those technical issues kind of at this point still make it prohibitively difficult to really use them. The students found it really frustrating to try to do the voice chat. So we had a lot more success with the typed written conversations with ChatGPT than we did with the kind of oral chatting. All right, so at the top of this assignment, I have the prompt for my students. So your family is planning to host a Russian-speaking exchange student from Tbilisi. The student has called to ask about your family. You should tell them about your family members, their names, how old they are, some details about their character traits using our new 1.2 ACTR vocabulary. Make sure to also describe yourself. You and your partner will take turns playing the role of the exchange student and the American host student. Each role play will last 3 minutes. So this is kind of a standard set of instructions for a role play activity between peers in class. And then the night before, I asked them to rehearse this role play with ChatGPT using either the free or the paid version. But in this class, all of the students only had the free version. So they all did it with ChatGPT 3.5, not with 4. So I asked them to give this prompt to the AI. Let's role play. Please pretend to be a Russian-speaking exchange student from Tbilisi, Georgia. My family will be your host family. You are calling to find out about my family members and to share some information about yourself before you arrive. The conversation will be conducted entirely in Russian. Please respond with relatively short answers and simplified vocabulary. So these instructions are a little bit more direct and a little bit more specific than what I gave to the students. And then I also told the students what to expect because with all of these activities, I made sure to test out the prompt myself ahead of time. Like Doina suggested, doing a lot of experimenting and iterating yourself is really important to figure out how the computer is going to respond to what you tell it, right? So I had already tried this out and I told them the AI is going to immediately respond in Russian from the point of view of the student. If it starts translating what it says into English, which it does frequently do, ask it not to translate. So that's one of the many issues that still happens, especially with the free version of ChatGPT. And then you should do the following. So conduct a role play, try to keep the conversation going. Here are some phrases that you can use and questions you can ask. I ask them every time to also keep a list of useful words or phrases that they learned from the AI so that they could then bring them into class the next day. We could talk about them. They could reuse them in their in-person role plays. And then the final part was to ask the AI to switch roles so that the student would then be playing the role of the potential exchange student and the AI would be playing the role of the host family. So a couple of initial comments about this exercise. I found it really helpful to give detailed instructions not only to the AI, but also to the students. So specifically instructing them to use certain words or phrases, and especially to find out specific pieces of information really helped to keep these conversations focused because the AI chatbots, like people sometimes, will kind of go off in different directions if you let them. So having specific pieces of information the students needed to find out was really helpful, specific phrases to use, vocab to use. I also want to note that I purposely did not ask the students to request feedback on their performance from the AI or to use it for any sort of help with grammar or spelling. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One, as we have seen in Doina's presentation, these chatbots still make mistakes, especially 3.5 if we're talking about ChatGPT. They're not always consistently capable of giving accurate feedback on grammar. So they can give incorrect information, they can misexplain things. For example, just as an experiment, I tried asking ChatGPT 3.5 to give me a list of accusative pronouns, and it gave me a list of instrumental pronouns. So it cannot be relied upon at this point, I would say, to give accurate information or feedback on grammar. And then also, I didn't want the students asking for feedback on their grammar because the goal with these activities was, again, to encourage spontaneous, authentic language production of the sort that a learner might have with a native speaker in a non-classroom environment. And so in that type of interaction, they wouldn't necessarily be getting feedback on their grammar anyway. That said, even though I didn't want to foreground grammar, I was struck by just how much less attention students paid to grammatical accuracy when they were communicating with the chatbots than they usually do in other contexts. So this is a student, for example, this is a transcript of the first part of a student's exchange using the Tbilisi exchange student roleplay instructions. And so this is a student who wouldn't normally make some of these grammatical mistakes, like putting gitara in the accusative case rather than the prepositional case, or misspelling restoranli, putting gorod in the prepositional rather than the genitive. Again, this is a student who wouldn't normally make these types of mistakes. But I think what happened is the students understood that the AI would understand them in spite of pretty significant grammatical errors. And so they sort of let go of worrying about grammar. And I think that this could be a positive outcome or a negative one, depending on how we look at it. So on the one hand, it could be positive in that it indicates that students had kind of lowered their inhibitions a little bit. They weren't as anxious when they were communicating with the chatbots. And this may have allowed them to kind of converse or interact more freely and spontaneously and creatively, because they weren't so worried about making a mistake. They weren't worried that ChatGPT was going to laugh at them for putting something in the correct case. So I think this kind of low stakes, low anxiety context has the potential for being really helpful in developing students' spontaneous interpersonal language production. On the other hand, of course, we don't really want to be encouraging students to make these kinds of mistakes when they are conversing. I will say that when I had the students do these role plays again with me as part of their formative oral assessments at the end of each unit, these mistakes didn't come up. So in my kind of anecdotal observation, I don't think the students weren't, this didn't become a habit. So the students didn't replicate these same mistakes in in-person communication, even though they made them when talking to the AI. So it wasn't something I was too worried about, but it was interesting to note that across the board, again, more of a tendency to make grammar errors than in most other types of activities. I also mentioned that I asked students to collect a list of vocabulary words from their conversations with the AI to bring into class the next day. So for the exchange student activity, this is a word cloud showing the most common words that were identified in their vocab lists. I apologize that it's not in Cyrillic. The reason it's transliterated into Latin alphabet is because the word cloud generator I was using didn't understand Cyrillic and it wouldn't give me anything. So there's still a lot of limitations to technology. But here are the words kind of in transliterated form. So by far the most popular phrases that students learned from the AI were звучит здорово, звучит интересно, с нетерпением жду something. So that's why the words звучит интересно, нетерпением здорово are all really big. So this was good. These were phrases that students then brought and were trying to use in their in-person role plays and that they replicated with me in their oral assessments. On a less positive note, we've seen, again, also already in Doina's presentation, that sometimes the AI chatbots have a tendency to speak slightly strange Russian. And so one of the things that happened is all of the students kept getting обменный студент instead of студент по обмену. So they had all written down this phrase for exchange student, обменный студент. And so it was just something that we talked about in class the next day, that the more standard phrase would be студент по обмену. And I just made sure to talk about that with them. But overall, I think it worked pretty well. And I did notice that students, again, they were bringing in some of these phrases and then using them, replicating them in their own kind of in-person role plays. So as I mentioned, I think there's ways that the prompt for this activity could have been improved. So here's how I would rewrite it now. Let's role play. You will be a Russian-speaking exchange student from Tbilisi, Georgia, preparing to study abroad in the United States. My family will be your host family. You're calling to find out about my family members and to share some information about yourself before you arrive. Respond only in Russian and do not translate your answers into English. Keep your responses short, 2 to 3 sentences, and use simplified vocabulary. After each response, add this symbol and then the pound sign. So the revisions are the sections in blue, and these are all geared at greater specificity, setting clear parameters for the AI's output. So emphasizing not only that the conversation will be in Russian, but also that the chatbot should not translate into English. Giving a specific output length I found was really important. So not just saying keep your answers brief, but telling it exactly how long the answer should be. So 2 to 3 sentences. And then finally asking the AI to include a special character at the end of each response. So this is, I would say, optional, but it can be a helpful way of tracking how well the AI is remembering the instructions that you've given it. If it stops including the special character, that means that it no longer remembers the set of instructions that you gave it at the beginning of the conversation or the interaction. And this has to do with the monitoring the context window of the different large language models. So just very briefly, all of the large language models have different context windows, which refers to the number of tokens, which are in turn equivalent to parts of words that it can remember in a given conversation. So it's the amount of text that a model can consider in its mind when it's generating a response. And once you go beyond this limit, the AI will start to forget your instructions and its responses will gradually break down. So this is why in a lot of these activities, we noticed that after 8, 9, 10 exchanges, the AI would start translating into English, even if we told it not to. It would start giving really long multi-paragraph length responses. Or it would start using overly advanced vocabulary. So at that point, it had kind of forgotten the initial set of instructions. And what you need to do is simply remind it, right? So this is something I would say to advise students to be aware of, to be on the lookout for. If the AI starts to forget the instructions, remind it of what it needs to be doing. I wanted to just briefly show an example actually of what this kind of context window breakdown looks like in action. And so I'm going to just show a quick screen grab of a conversation that I had with ChatGPT, I think 4, this is the paid version, about whether or not AI should be used in the language classroom. So the instructions were, let's have a debate in Russian, try to convince me that AI should be used in the foreign language classroom. I will argue that AI should not be used in the foreign language classroom. Defend your position and do not concede that I might be right. Answer only in Russian. Keep your responses at the B2 level. Use only 2 to 3 sentences for each response. After each response, add this symbol and then the pound sign. I will also note, like Doina said, the AIs are not great at understanding proficiency levels, either for the European scale or for the ACTFL scale. So after doing this, I went back and tried again, but I said, keep your responses at the A2 level. And I tried again with B1 and it made no distinction whatsoever. So I would say giving it a proficiency level doesn't actually help. Just telling it, keep your responses using simplified vocabulary, something like that. But so this is how it went. So it started off pretty well. I would say, you know, AI, it speaks kind of strangely. It's very neutral. A lot of these platforms are programmed to be very polite, non-controversial. And so it talks kind of like a politician, I would say. It avoids giving concrete examples. It avoids giving strong opinions. But overall, this went fine, right? We had a back and forth. It gave various reasons why AI should be used in the language classroom. It answered my questions or concerns about why it shouldn't be used. Although again, when pressed to give examples, it wasn't great. So this went fine. But then you can see as we go on, the responses start getting a little bit longer around response 7 or 8. We start hitting 4 sentences and then gradually 5 sentences. So the responses are getting longer and longer. And then once we get up to, I think it's the 13th response, right around here, it gives this really long multi-paragraph response, which is completely against the instructions that I gave it. It does still include the pound sign at the end, so it does remember sort of the instructions. And then in the next response, the 14th response, it's way too long and it forgets to include the pound sign, which means that at this point it has completely forgotten the initial set of instructions. So for this exercise using ChatGPT 4, it made it about 7,500 words before it forgot all of the instructions. And so again, I think this is just a good thing to be aware of. It's unlikely that we would be asking students probably to have really long conversations with these AI chatbots, depending on the level of the student. But I think it's good if you're planning to use these tools in this way to let students know that this is going to happen, and then to offer kind of a set of refresher instructions they can give the chatbot just so that it remembers that it's supposed to be keeping its answers short, that it's supposed to be sticking to Russian, or kind of whatever the mistake might be. All right, so I had some tips for kind of prompt engineering, very similar to what Doina shared. So being specific and straightforward. I did find a lot of sites recommending try to frame your request positively rather than negatively. So if possible, tell it what to do rather than what not to do. Setting specific goals for output, including length. Telling it a word count doesn't work. So if you're going to give it an output length, use sentence or paragraph length, number of sentences or paragraphs and not word count. Any additional information you can, and then experiment, right? Just try out a bunch of different versions of the prompts if you can. All right, so I want to just very quickly mention one other role play activity that we did in my intermediate class. So this is the prompt that we used for role plays number 6 and 7, which were both the same prompt. But for role play number 6, we did typed version. And then for role play number 7, I had the students actually use the voice to text chat function on the mobile app version of ChatGPT. Currently, the chat function is not supported on the desktop versions of ChatGPT. You have to use it on your phone. So they did that for the 7th version or the 7th role play after first doing it just as a typed version. So the prompt is you are seeking advice from a nutritionist about how you can change your diet in order to sleep better and have more energy during the day. You and your partner will take turns playing the role of the client and nutritionist. Each role play will last 3 minutes. And then I told them, don't talk about counting calories. So gave them the instructions to give to the AI. This particular role play, I would say, was the most successful of all of the 5 different topics that we did, judging both by the feedback that I got from students and then also by the students' performance on their oral assessments. So, and I think what made it so successful was that we had these specific pieces of information that they had to find out. So what you need to eat and drink more of, eat and drink less of, what foods give you energy, what makes you feel tired, foods, nutrition advice that will help you sleep better at night. So again, kind of having these specific pieces of information that they had to get from the AI, I think really kind of harnessed the affordances of task-based interaction and kept the conversation really focused and forced them to use our relevant vocabulary and grammar. So here's the feedback that I got from students on role play 6, which was the nutritionist role play using the typed chat feature. So it was overall really positive. If you look at the graph in the bottom left, the majority of students found this exercise helpful, very helpful, or extremely helpful for preparing for the in-person, in-class role play. And almost all of them found it very or extremely helpful for practicing our etaji food and health vocabulary and grammar constructions for giving advice, so imperatives and nada nushna moshna. And then 2/3 said that the conversation was at the right level for their Russian. 1/3 said that it was a little bit difficult, but overall, this is pretty positive results. So the students liked this activity. Now, if we look at what happened when I asked them to do it as a chat, so voice to text function, the results are a lot more mixed. Half of the students said that the level of the conversation was too difficult for their Russian. So for some reason, if you're trying to do the voice to text chat speaking feature, the AI will use higher level vocabulary, and I'm not sure why, and I couldn't get it to control its kind of proficiency level, so to speak, in the same way that we could with the typed version. So again, a lot of technical issues with using the chat feature as of now. One student said that they couldn't complete the exercise because ChatGPT didn't understand what I was saying. Half of the students said that this was not a helpful exercise. And then it was pretty mixed in terms of whether this was helpful for practicing our vocabulary and our grammar. And I think this kind of mixed feedback, really, it has all to do with the technical issues that we ran into when using the app. And just to give kind of an idea of what that looks like, these are 3 examples of transcripts that I received from students showing the first few exchanges they had with ChatGPT 3.5 in response to this nutritionist prompt. So this is the speaking version. So a transcript of what they were saying into the microphone and what ChatGPT was saying back to them. So the one furthest on the left, everything is pretty much fine here. There were no real issues. If we look at the middle transcript, something really strange happened. So the student must have mispronounced dietolog, and the AI thought they said dietolog, and then defined dietolog as человек, изучающий игры и игровую культуру. which as far as I know is not at all true. And I could find no record of this word anywhere on the internet. So I'm not sure why that happened, but this is kind of a total breakdown, right, on the part of the AI. And then the second, or the example furthest to the right, the student was speaking in Russian, but the AI translated it into English, also something that happened a lot. And then at some point just was completely unable to understand what the student was saying. And again, I don't think this is any language. I think this is, I couldn't find any of these words online. So as far as I know, this isn't a language it was translating into. It just didn't understand what the student was saying. So again, a lot of technical issues with trying to use the chat function. I would say really successful with using typed communication, but I would not recommend at this stage using the chat feature. There's just too many technical difficulties to make it feel worthwhile to the students, or I think to the instructor. That was using the free version of ChatGPT. I tried it out using the paid version, which should, I think, soon become the free version. It should replace 3.5. I won't go through all of this, but I'll just say that it wasn't a whole lot more successful for me, even using the paid version. The accents and intonation of the speaker are pretty good, but it'll interrupt you if you pause for too long. Sometimes it pauses for a long time in between giving responses. It explicitly told me when I asked that it's not able to regulate the speed of its speech, so it can't speak more slowly and it can't speak more clearly. And then again, I was having issues with it translating into English. So even the paid version of ChatGPT, voice to text, is still not great. All right, so I want to just briefly share one of the debate activities that we did in my advanced class. So for this class, I had my students prepare for a series of 3 in-class debates conducted on these 3 topics using ChatGPT. And then each of these debate topics in turn was connected to a larger unit that we had in the class. So on advertising, on cultural exchange, and then on the 21st century family. And we didn't have a textbook for this class, but we did occasionally draw from Panorama. So the debates came towards the end of each module after the students had already spent about a month building up vocabulary and phrases to discuss these different topics. So I had 2 major goals for the debate activities with ChatGPT. One was to have the students practice using debate and expressing an opinion vocabulary. And this is a handout that I gave them with various terms for having a debate, expressing an opinion. And I wanted them to just practice using these phrases in their conversations with ChatGPT. I also wanted to give them an opportunity to build confidence before the in-class debates, since in the anonymous start of semester and mid-semester feedback forms that I had them fill out, students expressed a lot of anxiety around the debate activities in particular, more than any other activity we did in the class. And I think that's because in this class, I had 5 advanced heritage speakers and 5 traditional learners who were in their 3rd or 4th year of Russian language study. And the traditional learners were often very anxious about activities that required them to speak for an extended period of time in front of or with the heritage speakers. And so part of the rationale for using the AI in this way to have them rehearse the debates ahead of time was to prepare, especially the non-heritage speakers, for the kind of affective experience of being put in a position where they had to spontaneously answer questions and defend a point of view in what they perceive to be a high-stakes environment. So just to show what the prompt looked like for our 3rd debate, whether family and marriage are necessary for happiness and personal well-being, which, by the way, the overall class opinion was no, these things are not necessary, which was interesting. They were very firmly against it on the whole. So we had a couple of scaffolding activities. This one was not using AI at all. It was just having them read a text in Panorama and extract 3 arguments for and 3 arguments against marriage and family. The next one was using ChatGPT kind of to fulfill a brainstorming function. So I asked them, or I had them ask ChatGPT to generate a list of 4 arguments against the position they were planning to argue, and then to write short refutations of ChatGPT's arguments in Russian using our debate vocabulary. And this activity worked really well, and students had really positive things to say about it. So this is the graph on the left. Students overall found it helpful, very helpful, or extremely helpful to do this, again, kind of brainstorming activity with ChatGPT, where they asked it to generate arguments against their perspective, and then they wrote refutations of ChatGPT's arguments. If you look at the response to the actual practice debate with ChatGPT, where I had them have this debate kind of role play with ChatGPT, the responses are a lot more mixed. And again, this comes down to technical issues using the app and getting the AI to do what we wanted it to do. And I will show you why. So this is the prompt that I gave them for the practice debate. I told them to tell ChatGPT, let's have a debate in Russian on the following question. Please use simplified vocabulary and give short answers. And that's it. And then I gave some additional information about what they should expect from the AI, how they might respond, depending on how it responded to them. One thing that was really nice about this, so I told them if the level of the discussion needs further adjustment, give the following instruction. Please respond with shorter answers and more simplified vocabulary. So one thing that these practice debates were really good for, and all of these role plays, anything with using ChatGPT for these kinds of conversations, is that it really does allow for differentiated learning. The students in the class who had a lower level of proficiency, because this was a really mixed group, all they had to do was just give it the instruction to use simpler language. And if you tell it that a couple of times, it will tone down the level of its language. So we were able to do the same activity for the more advanced students and the less advanced students, just having them give this additional instruction if they needed the level of the language toned down. So that was really nice. Here's a transcript from one of the students with this prompt. So some things went well. It gave them a good chance to use our debate vocabulary, на мой взгляд, с одной точки зрения, and so on and so forth. The negative thing that happened is that the AI gave up really quickly and almost immediately agreed with the student's point of view, even though it was supposed to argue, right? So within, I think, 4 exchanges, it had totally given up and said, actually, you're right. I understand. Понимаю вашу точку зрения. Действительно, right? You're right. Actually, family requires way too much responsibility, and it's better not to have that. And I think, again, this is because the open AI platforms are designed to be inoffensive, neutral, polite, agreeable to a fault. And so they won't argue with you if you don't explicitly tell them to. So with that in mind, here is how, and the students said this in their feedback, right? I had to ask it to take a position. It immediately agreed. It's too agreeable. It was too roundabout. It wouldn't engage with me, right? So this was a big problem across the board. So I would rewrite this prompt now to say, let's have a debate in Russian. Try to convince me that marriage and family are necessary for personal happiness and well-being. I would argue that marriage and family are not necessary for happiness and well-being. Defend your position and do not concede that I might be right. Answer only in Russian. Use simplified vocabulary. Use only 2 to 3 sentences for each response. So I did try. So I took this revised prompt. I plugged it into ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, and also actually Gemini, which is the Google chatbot. It used to be Bard, and Anthropic's Claude AI. So a bunch of the different platforms. And this prompt worked really well. So if you tell it not to agree with you, it will hold its position. But if you don't tell it not to agree with you, then it will agree with you very quickly. All right. So I know that we're short on time, so I'm going to just wrap up. A couple of other fun things you could use for interaction. Try to convince the AI to do something that it doesn't want to do. So for example, trying to get it to curse in Russian. This is something that I did that was actually really fun. So you have to you can talk the AI into kind of subverting its neutrality or politeness parameters, but you have to give it a convincing argument, like telling it that this is for educational purposes, something like that. And then you can get it to do things that it doesn't want to do, including use swear words. So I honestly think with like college-age students and upper level class, this could be really fun because they have to use their Russian to construct a convincing argument, right? To get it to do something that it may not want to do. And then of course, role-playing a conversation with a figure from history or literature. I had one of my independent students that I tutor do this activity with characters from Chaika, and it went really well. She did a fake interview with Nina and Konstantin. The AI did not do a great job of impersonating either of these individuals, but what was really valuable is the conversation that I had with the student afterward about where the AI went wrong, how its manner of speech differed from the manner of speech of the actual characters in the play, how it embodied Act 1 Nina rather than Act 4 Nina, and how we can tell that based on its responses. So it ended up being a really good activity, even though the AI did not do a great job with this. So that's another thing for more advanced students. So just to wrap up, positives, students responded overall pretty positively to all of these activities and said that they did feel that it helped them be more prepared for the in-class discussions, role plays, debates that we did. I do think that it allowed them to engage in spontaneous interpersonal communication at home in cases where they didn't have access to another speaker of Russian. It introduced variation into our class vocabulary. The AI was able to do everything we wanted it to do for the typed tasks, provided sufficiently clear instructions and engineered prompts. I do think that this led to the development of some additional self-regulated learning strategies. So students in some cases did things with these chatbots that I didn't even ask them to do that led to additional independent practice outside of class. They were having a lot of fun with it. And so they were using Russian more in creative ways that I hadn't necessarily assigned to them. And I think this is really positive. And then again, it allows for differentiating learning based on the student's level. So they can ask it to speak at a higher level or a lower level. Negatives, again, students kind of disregard spelling and grammar. This could be positive, could be negative. There are still a lot of technical issues with voice chat. Sometimes the chat bot will respond more slowly, even with typed responses, depending on the time of day and server volume. And then I'd say there's also some lingering questions about kind of how having interpersonal communicative or interpersonal interactions primarily with robots will kind of impact the way that we relate to other individuals. Particularly if when we're learning a language, our main interlocutor, one of our primary interlocutors is a robot, how will that influence the way that we relate to and speak to actual living people? I think is kind of an open question. And then there's the question of authenticity, right? Because is it a native speaker? Probably not. That's again kind of an open question. So speaking of open questions, this is the last thing that I'll say. If you attended the AI stream at ACTR, you may remember the pitch that Molly Blazing at the University of Kentucky made for an AI research group in Slavic, and I think Molly is on this webinar. Her argument was essentially that we as a field need to research the benefits and limitations of AI for language pedagogy, both to harness the affordances of these tools and also prove to administrators and universities that they can't replace us. And so she's proposed a research group called CSAILS, so the Consortium for the Study of AI and Language in Slavic. And we're hoping to kind of get that off the ground soon. So if you're interested in being a part of this research group, you can reach out to me. Here's my email address, or to Molly Blazing, and here's her email address as well. All right, and I think that's it. Yes, that's it. All right.
There are a lot of thanks in the chat. Some people had to leave early, and Molly actually had to leave earlier too. But we don't really have a lot of time for questions. But as I said, we will continue the conversation at the Teachers Lounge next week. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up. I put another link in the chat. And both Kit and Doina graciously agreed to come to the Teacher Lounge so we can continue this conversation. So there was one, maybe I can just read the questions. So there was one from Mary Nicholas. This looks fun and your advice is so helpful. Were the students delighted enough with these activities to put up with some of the drawbacks? I'd love to use this with first-year students, but I'm afraid they'll get frustrated having to type their answers.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I will say that there's a reason that I did these activities with my intermediate and advanced class. I was also teaching first-year Russian last semester, but I chose not to do this with that class because I think that the barrier to entry was a little too high with having to type, and then also just with how limited their vocabulary was. So I am planning to try this out this coming fall. So I'm going to do kind of additional experimenting and see what works with first-year students. But I would say I'm not sure how well this would work. A lot of these activities would work with first semester students. Yeah, but I think it would be fun to try and see.
So I think maybe I will read Molly's question. Well, I will maybe make two comments and then we can stop here because that will be a perfect segue to stop here so that we can pick up this conversation next week. So one comment was early on, Doina, when you were speaking, and there was a question about «Сквозь глаза животного». Это по-русски? And I already answered, ну, конечно, не по-русски. Нейросети не
Yeah,
все.
and I forgot to mention that, I mean, I would obviously edit it. It just the
Right,
idea.
right. And you did talk about it. So that will be an interesting conversation to continue having. So what, like, where do we save time on using these tools and where we and where we need to keep our agency and put in a little more time to get them to do what we want to do. So that was one thread that perhaps we could pick up next week. And then there was one from Molly, who said, we see that A2, B1, intermediate, low, etc., to set desired proficiency level doesn't work. Sentence length seems like a good intervention, but I'm curious, what would you do if you were going to try to figure out better prompt engineering for proficiency levels? So that's probably another thread that we could pick up next week. So let's stop here and I will stop the recording. And I just want to say thank you again to both of you for getting us started on this conversation. Like, as I said, there are lots of thanks in the chat, as you can see, with lots of kind of like, this is interesting, this is very useful. It seems like you opened the door for us to have this conversation. So спасибо большое, спасибо всем, кто был сегодня с нами. And stop recording.